Microplastics have found their way into our bodies, um, into our uterus. They've been found in amniotic fluid for babies that are developing, in breast milk. And the smaller they get, so from microplastic to nanoplastic, it is microscopic to the eye, but it is so small and insidious that it can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is our our strongest defense and against attack on the brain.
Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. This week I'm joined by Holly Hogan. Holly is a seabird biologist who has dedicated a huge part of her career to understanding the ocean plastics crisis. Over several decades, Holly has witnessed the devastating impact of plastics on marine life, as she wants to help you break free from a plastic-dependent lifestyle. We dive into Holly's firsthand experience at sea and her book, Message in a Bottle in the Age of Plastics. The softcover is out now. This is a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. This podcast is brought to you by TELUS Smart Home Security. Secure, simplify, and easily monitor your home from anywhere using the Smart Home Security app. Visit TELUS.com/smarthome-security to learn more about Canada's most trusted security provider. Hi, Holly. It's really good to see you.
Hi, Tamara. Really nice to see you too.
I have so much to ask you because I just feel like this is something that we're all talking about now, and we should be talking about. What made you want to write this book?
Well, I've been traveling the oceans and working on seabirds for over 30 years, and I've become quite in love with seabirds. I started working on seabird colonies and doing a lot of work in blinds, so spying on puffins and watching them, meet at the nest and and build tap and uh, have just affectionate moments with each other, and then raising their chick and fledging their chicks, and just really intimate experiences with seabirds on the colony. And then later on, I started doing seabird surveys at sea and watching them, counting them, seeing what they're doing far away from shore, which is where most people don't see them at all. And over these past, especially the last 15 years, I've really noticed an increase in marine plastics, and it was starting to set off alarm bells for me. And so the reason I wrote the book is because once I started to do some research on what plastic was doing to the oceans, to marine life, and to our own bodies, I felt like people really had no idea what was going on out there. And I had an unusual set of circumstances where I was spending huge amounts of time in really remote areas. So I wanted to write the book to bring the reader with me, to become invested in these beautiful seabirds, to fall in love, and to care about what was happening at sea. And I've always felt really strongly that people want to do the right thing. They just can't do anything about a problem that they're unaware of, and that's fair enough.
Well, it's almost like, that saying out of sight, out of mind, right? So we don't see puffins. I've never seen a puffin. I've seen penguins at the zoo when I was a kid. But you don't see them, right? Like I live in Vancouver, you're in Newfoundland, right?
That's right.
And so, I see seagulls and that's about it. And so how do we get people to is it now that it's affecting human beings? Maybe that'll make people care more?
Well, that's a really good point, because before I wrote the book, I developed a talk on marine plastics, um, for these expedition trips that I also do to the Arctic and the Antarctic on small expedition ships. And we always give presentations on the areas that we're in to sort of provide a context for people as they experience the landscape and the penguins and what have you. And so I decided that if I was going to work in Antarctica, and I wasn't sure even if that was a great idea from a philosophical point of view, this pristine wilderness, should we be disturbing it at all? But if I was gonna be there, I wanted to do something that of import, or at least that I felt would be really important, and because everybody shows up at these talks, I did one on, the impact marine plastics are having on the oceans and on seabirds, and of course, people are immersed in that wild environment when you're in Antarctica. But I also, when it came to the human health aspect, quite honestly, I just started research on that strategically because, a lot of these people that travel to remote places like that have deep pockets. And they aren't necessarily interested in the whales or penguins. They might be interested in setting their foot on the seventh continent or visiting the places that Ernest Shackleton, the explorer, went. And so I started to research the effects on human bodies because everybody cares about themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. But when the further I got into, the research on the impacts on human health, the more I mean, I became sincerely invested in the issue and, uh, and its importance and what it's doing to our own bodies.
Yeah. So I was reading that in a pivotal moment for you was in 2017, and you were near New York City.
That's right.
And what did you see?
So that really was a pivotal moment for me. Um like, I had seen plastic on the ocean, and I had seen it in very remote, odd places, like in the smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a Javex bottle, and a refrigerator off of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, like, just bizarre things. But, um but on this particular day, it was February 14th, Valentine's Day, and the ship that I was doing surveys on, was sailing past, New York City and past the harbor, and littered all over the ocean were these deflated Mylar balloons, those shiny balloons, helium-filled, and, they were lying and undulating on the surface of the water with their ribbon trains looking exactly like jellyfish. And of course, there's a lot of marine life that is attracted to undulating things on the water because it looks like food, including loggerhead turtles, sea turtles in general. And I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye, and I looked, and there was a loggerhead turtle slowly trying to chase down one of these balloons. And I knew that if it was successful and had eaten it, it would have been extremely problematic, if not, um, if not fatal for the turtle. And, um, and that was one of the first times I'd actually seen it, like, I'd seen dead seabirds in gill nets. I'd seen other forbidding and foreboding bits of plastic gear in the water, but I had not seen the interaction physically live, um, in action before that moment, and it startled me to a place of wanting to take action.
Well, and because it's a also an item that we see all the time in everyday life. We see them when we walk by maybe a florist shop, or we see them at a birthday party. We maybe bought them for somebody for their birthday.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, of all the things in the world that the world does not need, it's Mylar balloons. I mean, they're given as a celebration. I mean, all of these balloons had "I love you forever" and all kinds of beautiful sentiments on them that were romantically perhaps let go and to the heavens, but it's not to heaven they go, it's to the open ocean, and people just don't think about where they end up, you know? And Mylar balloons in particular are a bit of a bee in my bonnet because I am seeing them on every survey I do offshore these days. I was sailing for days, this was last spring, and we were well offshore, and I saw a balloon, and I keep track of these things in my notes, and I asked the captain where we were, and he said, "Oh, we're about, 200 miles, southeast of Cape Race. And I thought, well, that sounds very familiar as a description. And it turned out that in nautical terms, it was a stone's throw from the Titanic. So it was just sort of a bizarre, for me, this is a modern tragedy of the ocean.
But that's something we control, Holly. We control things like mylar balloons. We control so many things. Like, I know that, we always when you think about plastics, are we, there's always this idea that, about plastic straws and Q-tips and plastic bags and the netting for fishing, or maybe the netting you even use in your garden, right? It's like it's almost like dental floss. I guess dental floss could be a problem. All of these things, there's so much of it. How did we get to this place where we use so much plastic? Has it always been like this?
Well, I mean, the thing is, plastic is a petroleum product, and the petroleum industry is a huge industry. And a lot of people don't realize that plastic actually is a petrochemical. And and so the petroleum industry, the best thing for them for making more money is for us to use more and more plastic. And so we have become addicted to this mentality of single use, of clean and clear and throw it away and it disappears. And we've been really misled in terms of what recycling does and what it's capable of doing as it stands right now. Um, and so basically it is the petroleum industry that is controlling the narrative about plastic and and saying that it's not dangerous. And in fact, plastic was listed in the Environmental Protection Act regulations in Canada, in 20, I think it was 2021. And, it might have been a little bit later, but not much later, and the federal government was sued for by Dow Chemicals, Imperial Oil, and it was also, the governments of Alberta and Saskatchewan joined in the messaging because I forget the legal term, intervened. The governments of Alberta and Saskatchewan intervened on behalf of, the oil industry because it's also the provinces also have a vested interest in producing oil, and they're not all that concerned about the effect on climate, the effect on our bodies, and the effect on the environment, and it's so frustrating.
It is frustrating. And it just feels so short-sighted, but also, I mean, obviously incredibly irresponsible for us as a species to just ignore this when we're the ones causing it, right? And I can't believe, like, my entire life, and same with you, we've watched this go from when we were kids to nobody ever worrying about any of this stuff, right? It never even was mentioned. And now here we are decades later, and I worry about it all the time. I worry about it for my kids. I worry about, but we still have people denying that any of this is a problem. And, I- and I know that I mean, I want to talk about how it impacts our human health, but it just always seems to be it's like really anything that you advocate for. It's like follow the money. Right? I mean,
It's the exact same story as the tobacco industry.
yeah, you just follow the money, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so can we just talk about what is the difference between a microplastic and a nanoplastic? Is there a difference?
The only difference is size. And so, yeah, so so what happens with plastic is, I mean, sometimes it is developed to start out as microplastics, like in the old facial scrubs and toothpastes, they had little microbeads, which were plastic. And but all plastic, just breaks as it becomes weathered, and it starts to break down. Like, if you have a sun chair out on the deck, eventually it becomes brittle and starts to crack up. for example. But that happens to all plastic. It doesn't turn into anything else except smaller and smaller pieces of plastic. In the book, I compare it to baking a cake. Um, and you can break the cake into as many little crumbs as you like, but it's still cake. It never becomes butter and flour and eggs. It's cake. And so as these pieces of plastic get smaller and smaller, like 5 micrometers or 5 millimeters, it becomes known as a microplastic. And they're particularly insidious when they become small like that because um, they're floating freely in the ocean. Everything is ingesting it because it's unavoidable. And these little microplastics, they give off toxins that are used to create whatever plastic they started as. Because there's thousands of chemicals that are used in plastics. Many of them are toxic. They leach out of the plastic. But then there are also little floating islands upon which that become colonized. Um, and so you get bacteria and algae and viruses and all kinds of things growing on the surface. And because they're so lightweight, they can travel huge distances. So you're introducing new disease pathogens or even just benign things to other places that don't belong there. So and microplastics have found their way into our bodies, um, into our uterus. They've been found in amniotic fluid for babies that are developing, in breast milk. And the smaller they get, so from microplastic to nanoplastic, it is microscopic to the eye, but it is so small and insidious that it can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is our our strongest defense and against attack on the brain. And so the impacts on human health have been noted and studied, and the more it's studied, the more they're finding. These plastics that are passing through the blood-brain barrier have neurological effects, creating symptoms like um, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Um, they have been found to increase risk of testicular cancer, breast cancer, to cause deformities and reproductive irregularities. The list goes on and on and on. And
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is terrifying. Because I mean, we hear about this stuff, right? Or we see it on social media as we're scrolling by. We hear, don't use single-use plastics, don't, you know, but what about when we see something that says, "Oh, it's BPA free and it's this free and it's that free," and then you feel better buying it, right?
yeah, so I can tell you briefly, if you'd like, the story of BPA. It's an additive that is like all these additives are given to or put in plastic to give it certain characteristics. So there was a researcher named Dr. Patricia Hunt who was working with mice, and she noticed that in her subject mice, they were developing these reproductive problems, tumors, and deformed young. And it wasn't part of the experiment, but she discovered that the cages, the abrasive cleaner, was causing the finish to break up a little bit, and the mice were eating it. And it was the BPA in that mouse cage covering that was causing these tumors. And that was when in Canada it was like, okay, BPA bad. We have to get it out of all our food items, water bottles and things. Other countries haven't followed suit, and but that's one out of 13,000 chemicals known to be used in plastics, and it's all proprietarial. So the companies don't have to tell you uh, what is in their plastic. It behooves them to tell you that it's BPA free because BPA has been given a black eye. But
But really, they should all have black eyes, all those chemicals.
yeah, yeah, and many of them, we don't know which ones are in which plastics necessarily. I mean, some we do know because because of the characteristics that the plastic has. But the other point about BPA is that it's no longer legal in Canada to use it in food with food products, but it has all kinds of industrial uses. And once it's in the ocean, and breaks down, it can go anywhere.
It can go anywhere. So what about when we a single use the plastic bottles for that we get water in. The when you buy your milk jug, it's plastic. I'm just thinking about things that are in my fridge right now. There's an orange juice bottle in my fridge. It's plastic. The milk one is softer. The orange juice one is harder. Like, are these all different chemicals that make them hard or soft, and is what's inside leaching from it? Oh gosh.
Yeah, and so, a recent study showed that in 1 liter of bottled water, there's approximately 250,000 plastic pieces, most of which are originating from the bottle itself. And so that is just such an obvious place to avoid, like.
But we think we're drinking this water because it's purified and better than what's coming out of our tap. I live in British Columbia. You live in Newfoundland. I know that the water here is like, I mean, I've always been told since I was a little girl, right? We have the best water in the world. And yet we drink, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and that's I mean, we have been lied to, basically, about it. I mean, when I was doing research for the book, there's a Petra, Petra, which is the polyethylene terephthalate resin association. So PET is one type of plastic, and it's the type of plastic that our water bottles are made of. And they were saying there's no known problem with PET. And then you go and read other scientific papers, and you find out that actually, yes, they're leaching a quarter of a million pieces of plastic in. So messaging is, it's really hard.
It's so hard because it's also, how do I say this? To keep the attention of somebody, right? I worked in television news for years and years, my whole career. And when you're telling a news story, you have 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes to tell a news story. And if it's a a local news program, you're telling local news. You're not doing a deep dive on microplastics and, now you might do that story if somebody dies and it's been proven that they died of microplastics. Do you know what I mean? That would then become a news story. But really in general, it wouldn't. It's so hard to tell these important stories that affect all of us and keep the attention.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few things to unpack there. First of all, they are finding a direct, literature. There's more and more scientific literature coming out that is making those connections between the toxins in plastic and human health. Though, and in fact, in this lawsuit against the federal government, they were not allowed to introduce new research that has gone further to prove the link between plastic and disease because it wasn't available at the time that the federal government had put the ban on plastic, deleterious plastic. So, um, but the thing is, if people, I mean, we're all talking about climate change right now, and moving very slowly on it. But what people don't realize is that the plastic industry, if it were a country, would be the fifth largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world after Russia, China, the US, and India. So it is a huge contributor to climate change. And of course, again, the petroleum industry, as we are turning to greener energy sources, the petroleum industry is pivoting to producing more plastic waste to give us more shiny things that we can throw away. And and but if we could just get rid of petroleum, we would have a limited amount of plastic. We have enough plastic on the earth right now to use differently, to rather than throwing it out, reusing it, reforming it, and making it a valuable commodity instead of the throwaway, pay oil companies more money to produce more plastic. It's a different model. It's referred to as the circular economy. And, it requires an entire paradigm shift. Yeah, but if you got rid of petroleum, you would get rid of ocean acidification because it's the carbon that is being absorbed into the ocean that is creating carbonic acid. It's a and that is what is acidifying the ocean, what is killing, um, coral reefs, and it would also, stop the faucet of constant flow of plastic to the ocean. So, I mean, it all comes back to the petroleum industry, honestly.
Wow. Um, okay, so before we talk about how we can, reduce our plastic consumption, boy, that's a big topic. I want to say that we like to thank our guests for being here, and so we asked our guests to choose a Canadian registered charity of their choice. And you chose the Sierra Club Emissions Cap Campaign. Thank you for choosing them. And we will give a donation in your name to the Sierra Club Emissions Cap Campaign. So thank you for choosing them, Holly. So, how do we, convenience, right? We're so busy. We think that, when we finish using that big bottle of shampoo, we rinse it out, and then we put it in our recycling, and off it goes to the recycling, and I've done my part. I've used it, and I'm recycling it, and off it goes. Um, a lot of people still don't recycle, believe it or not. I mean, you know that better than anybody around the world, right? Like, I think in, the bigger cities, we try to. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not an expert on it, but I like to think that we do. But I guess I have so many questions about this. Like, one, are we recycling properly? Like, is it true when I think, oh, off it goes, and there they pick it up, and it's getting, oh dear, you're shaking your head.
No, unfortunately, I hate to be shaking my head, but it depends so much on the recycling facilities where you live. But the fact that it has a number on it does not mean it's gonna be recycled. That's just a resin code. It's a shorthand for if it's, polyethylene terephthalate, it's a number 2. If it's a high density polyethylene, it's number 5 or I don't remember, I don't know the numbers, but and they have those chasing circles, that Mobius loop around them, which all suggests that it's gonna be recycled when you throw it in there. But many plastics, aren't recycled because the facilities can only do number 2s and it does vary, and without getting in touch with your municipal board, you don't know what's being recycled. And there's also a lot of green cycling, like in airports, you see, you know, recycle and if somebody throws their burger in there with, their clamshell, well, more likely than not, the whole lot is ruined because, very few places can deal with dirty plastic. Some places can, but otherwise, you've just contaminated, the whole load of
They don't rinse it? Like, there's nobody why did I think there was somebody there rinsing them and sorting them? Like, oh my gosh.
no, you just get a big bag full of, whatever, and but that's identifying more problems.
Yes, yes. So how do we fix it as a person? What are your recommendations? What can we all do that if we're listening right now and we're like, okay, what can I as a single person or a family make a difference?
Sure. Well, I would say first, starting at the macro and working down, we need to influence governments. So vote. You can have a lot of power with your vote. With your investments, if you have any investments, what are you investing in? And I have a financial advisor, and I had no idea where my money was going. There's not much of it anyway. But when I spoke to my advisor, I realized I had money in oil and gas, and once I picked myself up off the floor, I It's things it takes a while to realize all the ways that you're having an impact, right? Negative or positive. And everything is a learning, growing experience. So it didn't occur to me, and I couldn't be, I could be forgiven for that. But once you know, then you do feel compelled to do something about it. So, and also the way you buy, whatever you buy, um, again, businesses, you have power with your pocket.
We think we don't, but we do have power with our pocket.
We do. I mean, so you took the shampoo bottle for an example. Well, one of the first things I do, if I'm gonna purchase something is like, is there a plastic-free alternative that exists? Now, this is not practical for a lot of families, I understand that, but if you can make some of these choices, because they're often more expensive, but shampoo bottle, I buy shampoo bars. There is 0 packaging with the shampoo bars or some cardboard depending on the brand that you buy. And same with conditioner, shampoo and conditioner, and I'm not you can see I have gorgeous lush hair.
Well, I've seen these shampoo bars. I see them.
And some of them are fantastic, if you get one that's a dud, don't give up on the whole idea. Um, and I will say I use one that's called from the Unscented Company, shampoo and conditioner bar. Um, you're not sacrificing anything, your hair feels clean and smooth and all that stuff. And so but, when it comes to food, when it comes to anything, look around and go, Do I need this thing? Do I need to send a Mylar balloon, or could I give somebody a beautiful plant to put in their garden or something?" Just looking at things a little differently and replacing foods. Like, I love spinach, and I cannot get it in Newfoundland if it's not in plastic. Sometimes seasonally, I can. And when I do, I freeze it, and the rest of the time, I'm eating chard or kale or something because you can't get that out of plastic.
Hmm. Well, these are habits, right? We're creatures of habit. And so if we're brought up in a way where we always, you know, pump our shampoo out of a bottle, then the idea of a shampoo bar is like, what? No, that's not going to work. Or
Yeah, you just put and you've got this great lather.
down the street from where I live, there's now a place. It's like a refill place. So, you go in, everything's there, everything from olive oil to vinegar, shampoo. I mean, absolutely everything. And I've noticed these zero waste food places showing where you bring in your own containers. Now, I know that for a lot of people, this sounds like a real pain in the butt, but it's better than these. It, it's the power of your wallet is something else. I tell you.
Absolutely, and these things would not exist if people weren't demanding it. And if there's a market there, there's gonna be someone to fill that market. What makes me really happy is to see things. I found a shampoo bar at Shoppers Drug Mart, and I thought, "Okay, this is mainstream. This isn't a boutique place." So the message is getting out there.
Can you hold up your book for me just so we can see it?
Sure.
Yes. So there it is. Message in a bottle. Ocean dispatches in the age of plastics. The soft cover is available. Holly, you have been just a joy to talk to. I've learned so much from you. Everyone should read your book. We could talk for hours about this. You're a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you do.
Oh, thank you so much, Tamara, and thanks so much for getting in touch. I was delighted to be a guest. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.